Good morning, Hyper Bitcoinization podcasts, and everyone else who's joining us. This day after Thanksgiving, you'll notice the sun is up, so we're good. Bitcoin's running, even better, even better. We can have our coffee and talk about the news. Nice to know there's consistency in the world, right? The sun comes up, Bitcoin keeps running. We're good. We're good. What else do we need to know, right? What else do we need to know before we talk about the funny stuff? So this is a real headline. This really happened on the planet we live on. And it was the so-called news source, Axios, right? So-called news source, Axios, who actually published this in the English language with letters, and they made a point, and they wrote a whole article that went with it. This is the actual story. This is the actual headline from Axios. Okay, I'm not making this up. This is not Babylon Bee is back on Twitter and came up with stuff. This isn't any of those things. Axios says, activists warn lives at risk over Elon Musk's amnesty plans for suspended Twitter accounts. Lives are at risk. So if you didn't know, Elon yesterday did a get out of jail for everyone. The same thing he did for Trump last week, the Vox Populi, Vox Dei, voice of the people, voice of God, let's have a vote. That's what got Trump back on Twitter. He did it again yesterday for everyone who's ever been kicked off the platform. He did one vote, everyone out. And, you know, there weren't as many bots involved, so obviously it went heavily in favor of uncensoring these folks and bringing them back onto the platform. Still, some of those edge cases not there, like Alex Jones, definitely not a part of it, according to what Elon Musk says. Again, remember, Elon, you know, when we talk about Alex Jones and Twitter, we don't have to actually talk about whether we support Alex Jones or not. I do that. I tend to mention how I think about Alex Jones before I talk about him. Of course, I continue to remind you he's entertainment. He gets a lot right, but it should be seen as entertainment and, you know, a whole bunch of stuff that goes with it. I continue to personally believe that we'll reward him and honor him when we're through World War III, and that, you know, maybe his time as an active soldier on the front lines of whatever the heck he warned us is happening here, you know, is kind of over. So that's my personal opinion. I don't think you need to talk about that every time with Alex Jones when you talk about Twitter. The reason why you do talk about Alex Jones on Twitter is because he is one of these edge cases that really shows you the ins and outs of what's going on and why people are censored and why they're not censored. So he really just does offer a case that's hard to make sense of in any one direction. I don't think there is a right or wrong answer strategically for the world we're in. Of course, in a vacuum, right, we can all understand this, and he would have a voice, of course. But we're not in a vacuum. There are many factors. You know, just as I said in the first Trump instance of him being president, it was going to be difficult, right? Having him as president in the first go around was going to cost myself a lot, right? I lost friends. There was only a certain way that you could talk about it. You had to alter the way you spoke with people just to fit in, right? Really complicated, but I thought it was worth it, right? So I thought it was worth it, and I think I was right. The amount of reality that was changed. I don't think Trump 2 is necessarily worth it, right? So that's why I continue to, I want the MAGA stuff. I want the Trumpism, the changing of reality piece, not the actual individual policies, but the changing of reality piece. And he might still be the best vehicle. Maybe, we don't know. I'm definitely looking for others. And once again, totally without forgiveness for Trump's last day in office, his particular last day when he did not pardon Assange in particular, Ross, all the people that could have helped him basically. And when they didn't get it, the pardon, you got to kind of wonder. So, you know, I'm definitely on the side that's looking for someone else. However, I don't want the spirit of MAGA to go, right? I want the spirit of changing the world to be there. So, you know, you gotta take it as you will. And sort of the same thing applies to Alex Jones. I want the things that Alex Jones spoke about to still be spoken about, right? I don't think we have to rely on only Alex Jones anymore. That's why it's such a weird edge case, right? He got us going on a lot of things, and that's why he is a national treasure and a kind of hero. Everybody knows he screwed up in the entertainment side of it when he went after the school shootings and everything he's getting in trouble for, the $3 trillion fine that he's got to pay for. So, I think he's got enough going on. But nevertheless, it remains one of the best cases to just be able to talk about where the line on having a Twitter account begins and ends. Elon Musk was very clear about using children and the whole gun thing. So, I can live with that. Like, I don't think that's unreasonable. And I continue to think, it doesn't say anything about my support for Alex Jones. Like I said, as an entertainer, even as a kind of thinker, his appetite to say things that would be embarrassing was really important for us to get through all of this fog and mischief that has been laid upon us by the propagandists. So, a real great guy, but we got to remember the context of it is, what does it cost us, right? And if him coming back means everyone can be tarred with the same brush as being unreasonable, don't take your time to get the facts together, interested in sensationalism, all the same kind of Trump stuff, right? Is there a way to get past this without paying that fee anymore? Can we make it less expensive to talk about these things? In the sense that we need to support Alex Jones or Donald Trump, lose a bunch of friends, lose a bunch of, let's say, connections that could have helped you make a better world anyway, right? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about connections. Today, we're going to be talking about loneliness. We're the day after Thanksgiving. It's not easy for everyone, right? I'm in a great position. I've got a beautiful wife and kids and family and but absolutely not everyone's there, and I don't think everyone can be there. I think the world has changed, and we're going to talk about it. But let's just start with this crazy fake news story, right? So Axios, lives are at risk over Elon Musk. So Bitcoin Magazine retweeted something that Elon Musk said, and it's basically what we've been talking about on this show, so I'll bring it up next, which is that Elon Musk calls the FTX media cover-up one of the biggest failures in U.S. journalistic integrity. And I think that's true, right? The amount of orange pilling, red pilling, white pilling, black pilling, you name it, the pilling going on from the pylon from the mainstream media to help SBF is getting a lot of people confused. Now, I saw someone yesterday, Max Boonen, a guy I respect. He's a very large market maker, B2C2. And he said something that might be true, right? Might be true, which is that, and sort of explaining the way that SBF lost all the money. Maybe it's this situation where, he just got squeezed and his plays were not maybe fraud, and he might not go to jail. They might not be able to prove fraud with what he did. And of course, everyone disagreeing, saying, it's clear he traded customer accounts, and that's fraud. I'm still waiting for the whole scene to be out. I can kind of see why there's a window, why he hasn't been arrested. That is legal, let's say, or in conformity with the law. It doesn't explain the media attention and the amount of sympathy shown for this character. And it happens again and again. It's not just one story. It's happening all over the place. So here's another one that was just published. And now it is, so, obviously David Sachs freaking out about all this. I don't know if I copied that one. Anyway, yes, I did. It was from Liz Hoffman. But where's the title? Where's the title that she had? Anyway, yeah, here. So I guess here's her explanation, right? Here's the explanation. I don't have the titles of the article, but here's what she says. Her quote about the article, and she had published some stuff about the money and where it went and what happened. It was letters from, so I guess the FTX employees got a letter from Sam that CoinDesk published, and she's talking about the article CoinDesk published that staff from FTX who got it from SBF shared. So what she says is, this mostly makes sense, and it's a description of how he lost the money. He described to his own staff how he lost the money. And so she says, this mostly makes sense to me. FTX had a lot of collateral, 60 billion against not that many liabilities, 2 billion. The problem is that the collateral was monopoly money and the liabilities were real money. just real basic banking stuff. So she's trying to just say this is actually not that complicated. It might not be. I mean, maybe she's right. But let's keep going. So Liz Hoffman, by the way, works for Semafor. And at the top of her Twitter profile, she says, first shameless startup pitch. Sign up here to follow along when we start publishing. And that was back in June. And so Semafor has been a while. Remember, we brought it up here first, and I said, this is a new thing, Semafor. Let's see what it does. Like, I like the format, their opinion, the counter opinion, the facts. Pretty interesting format. Now, I'll remind you, as I did yesterday, that SBF was one of the major seed donors here and is one of the major backers of Semafor. So Semafor continues to come up with very gentle articles about SBF. So, whether the legal part is true and how we lost the money and exactly where the culpability is and exactly where the trouble is, like I said, Max Boonin made the argument that if there's no fraud there, right, if you're not able to prove intent to rob people, then it's going to be hard to put them in jail, and people have to just accept that. It might be hard. Now, put that aside for a second. I think the details are there. My mind is open to it not being the case. I think the details are there, and it's all the guarantees that he won't trade against deposits, that he did trade deposits, and that it should be just on its face. In the legal world, we say prima facie, face value, facie, right? Prima facie. At face value, you should be able to say this is a problem, right? A lot of things in law are held, even to get a case going, you just do it prima facie. You say, at its face, does it look bad? Yeah, that's enough to get a case going in a criminal system, right? Does it look bad? Yeah, we gotta look into this. So you start pushing things. It's not charges, but you're able to at least start the process with prima facie. So it looks prima facie fraud, and now people even doubting the numbers, right? This is a letter internally from SBF to the staff, which was leaked to CoinDesk. I bet I know how it was done. There is a particular former staff member at CoinDesk who did work for FTX. I knew him, Nathaniel Whitmore. I helped hire him at CoinDesk years ago, and worked with him for a long time, and knew when he got the job with FTX. Now, one of those cases, again, let me remind you what I just said about Trump. He was one of those people where I couldn't exactly say what I had on my mind, even though this was someone who sort of, at the time, ostensibly was sort of lower on the, seniority, let's say, of CoinDesk. At the time when I hired him, I still was a sort of small, tiny part owner of CoinDesk, and had been there since Barry bought it. So I brought him in to help and do stuff, and he was very successful. So now he is a major part of CoinDesk. But already at the time, his intense Democrat politics were very difficult to deal with, because we had no political stuff that would come out of us. We were definitely, neutral. But he was one of those people. If you are a liberal Democrat, especially when Trump was president, you didn't hesitate to say your opinion in a New York office, even though most of the people in the office, well, not most, half, right, as far as the breakdown of Trump supporters and not Trump supporters. So he didn't really necessarily even understand the audience wasn't that friendly to Democrat ideas, and that mostly it had already been, orange, red, whatever pilled. If you spend enough time with me in a small working office, you're going to have a much more open mind to politics and have a bit of an off script take on things. So, I was talking about this stuff privately with people, and he wasn't really in our office. He would come down sometimes and mostly joined us on calls. He was one of our first sort of virtual workers, that would be out of the office. Anyway, the point is, he ended up getting a gig as an executive with FTX. So he does his podcast with CoinDesk, but was also an executive with FTX. He's the guy responsible for FTX's advertisements. Are you in? The one we talked about, how it was really like boomer kind of social mimicry and trying to fit in, that kind of advertisement, not like product features, which is more of a independent minded person. The way to reach them in advertising is to just give details of the product, right? Which is where we want to head towards advertising again, especially Bitcoin stuff, We talked about that on this show, just showing the Coinbase ad recently, all about, our reserves are held 1-to-1 and we don't trade customer deposit details, right? Versus advertising psychologically that's oriented towards boomers has always been about fitting in socially, right? It's just the way it is. And that is sort of passed down to millennials in that world of consumption. Bitcoiners, of course, are people that pull away from this, and I'll explain why in a second. There's a cost to it. Remember, I keep mentioning the cost. The cost of supporting Trump in 2015, 2016, 2017 is sometimes you had to self-censor, right? You just had to. You couldn't be in every environment and assume everyone was in agreement with you and assume they wouldn't be shocked by your opinions. Now, I was already, people who knew me were already shocked that I spoke so openly as I did about being a Trump supporter, because I didn't really hide it. I would use it as a way to meet people and to be sort of confrontational. Oh, Hyper Bitcoinization podcast asks, where's the board? So the board I've reduced a little bit now. It'll come back more, but I'm just trying to integrate a little more content. Sold it for sats, he says. No, it's down on the floor. The kids actually drew on it last night, and I partly didn't have time to erase it and start over when I noticed the damage they had done. But truthfully, the board, I'm going to limit the board a little bit because I'm going to be doing the other show with Bitcoin Magazine in the afternoon, the news and notes piece, and I just need to be able to catch that time back. If the morning show is too stressful for me, I won't be able to do it, right? And I want to keep the stress level easy and low and make this having coffee, right? Like the board was no problem bringing in before. It was just like a way for us to talk about the news, talk about all the stuff, a way for me to share what I'm interested in that morning and all those things. But the board, while fine if I don't have an afternoon show, takes me about a half an hour to come up with the board, to write it, draft it, draw it, all that stuff. I've basically I'm saving that half an hour of, I've only got so much creative energy in a day, right? It's not about how much hours you can work in a day. It's how many times you can squeeze the rock to get the good juice out. And I got a couple of squeezes in a day, right? But I got to be honest with how many squeezes I have, right? So I got to save a little bit for the afternoon. So once I see that I can do both, once I've proven it to myself, I'll be able to bring the board back more consistently. Right now, you'll get a board if I have a really great idea and I need a board. So then you'll get a board. But it's not just going to be, it used to be that I was only doing it for 5 days in the week, and in the weekends, I would sort of not do the board unless, again, I had a great idea that needed a board. And that's what I'm going to limit it to now. So some of the boards I put up there in order to work as sort of an agenda, and I know what I have to talk about, and I can keep track of things. So those are the ones I'm not going to do, right? Those are not as high value. So when AI generated a board, just type in your topics and see what pops up. That's a great idea, JW. I am going to do that. That is a fantastic idea. Not only that, just so everyone knows, I'm going to start illustrating my book with an AI. So if you guys don't know, the point of my story is that everyone has their own eyeball, an AI ball, and that manages our Bitcoin for us and does our transactions. It's like our best friend, right? It protects us from fake news. Not that there is fake news. It helps propagate news and makes everyone an on-the-go news studio, and you can sort of share whatever you see, So that's it, right? So I have a Bitcoinization podcast. Take care of your time, sir. Very good. I love the board. You're going to see more boards. Don't worry. You're going to see more boards. Like I said, it's really just about integrating this stuff. Not a surprise, but we have to manage things at the magazine for all the craziness that's going on, and it's really just an all hands on deck. Let's get through the winter situation. So, for me anyway, putting new stuff into my hopper is fine. I have the time, energy, concentration, focus. I just put things in stages, let's say. So I've pulled back on about 30 minutes of my time in the morning, and I'm adding it to my early afternoon where I can think of the news and notes, which is sort of a copy of this stuff, but it's a little tweaked and some original stuff. So anyway, there you go. I don't want to get too sidetracked, but thank you for asking, and thank you for complimenting the boards, because I do love them. I do. I think they're a lot of fun, and if I do them every day, I get better at them, which is fun, right? So, but anyway, let's keep going with Liz Hoffman. So So the details of the letter, remember, we're talking about the letter from staff, from SBF to staff at FTX that was leaked to CoinDesk. I made up all that stuff. I have no idea if it was my friend Nathaniel Whitmore who shared the letter. I'm just guessing, just me looking, just guessing. So no idea if it actually was that case. But Nathaniel has been covering this stuff. I was worried at first that Nathaniel was caught up in this stuff because they both have the Democrat politics. But luckily, it looks like Nathaniel had nothing to do with it, no clue about what was going on, and is mostly now turning all of his attention to attacking SBF, which I really appreciate, because the Democrat stuff worried me, that they were so in sync about those politics. But I bet you, just a guess, I bet you Nathaniel Whitmore's eyes have opened up to a lot of this stuff over the last little bit, especially the way the media has handled it. So, there you go. So the letter was leaked. Liz Hoffman treated it all as real and then said, well, maybe he's fine, right? Maybe it makes sense that he's coming to keynote a show next week in New York City. Yeah, it's fine, right? But David Sachs jumps in, and David Sachs says, the basic flaw of this narrative is if the $8 billion in liabilities were actually customer deposits that SBF had no right to take, but nevertheless appropriated for his personal use, that's not a case of balance sheet mismanagement. It's theft and fraud, right? Because that's what she's saying. This mostly makes sense to me, right? The problem is that the collateral was monopoly money and that he just mismanaged it. He didn't know liabilities. He didn't know what he had on the balance sheet, didn't know what his liabilities were, and the whole thing went bust, right? So she even says, setting aside whether there was fraud or not, a question for the DOJ, right? This appears to be just a run on the bank. It's not a bank. Let me just say, FTX was not a bank. I busted my ass to get a bank license in Wyoming. And do you know how we got it? We said we wouldn't do this. We wouldn't lend customer deposits. That's the only reason we got the bank license. We were limited ourselves from this one feature of maturity transformation, of taking deposits and lending them back out. We're not allowed doing that at the bank in Wyoming. Kraken can't do that. That was the deal. That's how we got it, right? Now, we thought get access to the discount window, which is the discount windows. Did you guys know this? You want to hear a hilarious story? You're not even going to believe this. So when I was at Kraken, and like I said, I was part of the team on the bank. I was a strategist for the whole company in general, but my principal file was the bank and competitors and what's going on and legal strategy and product strategy and everything related to the bank. The bank only had like 2 official employees, and they were busy just getting the company set up. They weren't really thinking about what we were supposed to do and how to make money and all those things. So immediately I put in place the idea of proof of reserves and why that was important, and help build the product and all those kinds of things. But what I was noticing was our main ability was through having the bank charter, we would get a account with the Fed Reserve. That was another point, was to have the account with the Fed Reserve, because then we would get cheap US dollars, as in free, at the discount rate, at the prime rate, right? So the rate that the banks borrow money from the Fed Reserve is always like 1% less than the rate that's out there. It's the overnight rate, right? So I was very interested in this product because I could see I did the research for Kraken on the BlockFis and how all the yield products worked. And I said, they don't work. This doesn't work. Like I had to reverse engineer them. And I was like, I can't make any sense of this. Either they have a source of dollars that's better than what we're after right now, which is the Fed discount window, or they're going to screw people over, right? Which is why I made the argument for the proof of reserves tool. I said, when this shit goes belly up, the only thing that's going to matter is how much Bitcoin you actually have, and that's going to be a marketing tool. So that was understood right away. And then I said, well, if we want to offer these products, we need to go to the Fed Reserve and get the discount window set up. So then I started we had a relationship with the Fed Reserve, and I started saying, well, we're going to be your client. So how do we get started, right? Did you know the Fed Reserve? I'm not shitting you. They have like a UX UI, like a user, like a website, right? For like a bank, right? They have accounts. They have a user manual. So when you start up an account at a commercial bank, right, you get all that package of stuff. The Fed Reserve has the same dang thing. They gave it to me. I had it, like, set up the account. Like, how do you get going on your account? But here's the best part. It's hilarious. You go to the discount window, right? It's literally a discount window. And I'm telling you, it looks like a payday loan page, right? 10 minutes. You can minimum $25 million, approvals in 10 minutes, no documents needed. I mean, it's unreal. It's unreal. And you just hit it. Give me the 25 mil. Now, they never let us do it. So we know that's why Kraken never offered these products. We said, we can actually make money on this product if we get the money from the Fed Reserve Bank and we can lend it out, right? If we get discount window money, the economics make sense, right? Because we get the cheapest money in the market. And because we have the cheapest money in the market, we can actually compete on rates of yield that are reasonable and better than others, right? That was sort of how we looked at it, but not possible, right? And that's why Caitlin Long is suing them, and you know, Kraken's involved in that, and because they're not even giving them access to the discount window. We you know, they gave us the manual sign up for the bank, but it was all bullshit. It didn't work. James Gant, people should talk more about the Bitcoin bond. Right now, people are hoarding USD. The BTC bond is a long-term antithesis to easy lending and QE, and it incentivized next stimulus over the next extraction. Hyper Bitcoinization podcast says, that's fucking crazy. Yeah, it is. So I'll go back to what James said. Did you notice today that the El Salvador office with Stacey Hebert set up the Bitcoin office for the president, where the bond is, you know, the bonds are going to, I guess, be constructed or whatever. So I offered immediately this morning. I saw it just before I came on there. I emailed, or I replied in the comments, you know, here to help, because I agree. I don't know too much about bond structure, frankly, but I can see what you're saying and agree that it's something we should definitely be looking at, because any way that these things can be included on the balance sheets of these central banks are very interesting to me right now. So, you know, we'll see. Muslim Bitcoiner, is your model what Bitcoin only companies like Swan and Strike maintain, which makes them different from the casinos? No, our model back then was not that. That's not the license we got. So the model worked like this. All assets are held in this bailment form, which is they cannot be commingled, and they're in separate accounts. So it's exactly like safety deposit boxes. Now, if you didn't know, you can't put cash in a US bank safety deposit box. That's illegal. So this was basically creating a safety deposit box to put anything you wanted, including cash. And it didn't have any yield. There's no interest. It's literally just a way to store your Bitcoin that makes not your keys, not your coins, not exactly accurate, right? So even though the keys, there are some wallet innovations going on, right? The green wallet from Blockstream does allow some kind of multi-sig functionality that a bank would like in order to hold assets this way. But there was no prejudice to what was put into the accounts. So what I mean is, it didn't say Bitcoin or dollars or Ethereum. It didn't care. Whatever you put was held in that way. And it's the same way. So it's an ancient form of law, by the way. That's why it's so useful. It's an ancient form of law. It's called bailment. And the bailment system works because the banks, commercial banks, use it with the Federal Reserve. What they do is they trade the T-bills for the dollars and then put the overnight interest as a, like, it should be a forward contract. It should create debt. In all logic, it creates debt between the depositor and the issuer. But in law, it doesn't. There is no debt created by that. So when they do the T-bill, when you hear the reverse repo transactions and the repo transactions, right? That's the central banks lending money overnight to the commercial banks to keep them solvent, right? I don't know if you guys knew that, but when one of the last media tours I did in 2019, before I forsook all mainstream media and stopped doing it, because they don't even give you the limo. It's not fun anymore, so I don't care. But I used to do them a lot, right? I used to go on all the fake news and have a good time and, you know, make fun of them, kind of be a little irreverent. If you want to go back and see some of the clips, that can be, a lot of them are pretty fun. So I went and did the tour in 2019, and they said, at the time, CoinDesk, I still say, if you think what we did here for what CoinDesk did for the SBF story is big, as far as CoinDesk breaking a story and getting like international relevancy, we should have had it in 2019, because we were all over the bank repos starting. And the bank repos were the central bank basically subsidizing banks to the tune of $25 billion a day, and then the 1% or whatever interest the banks just keep. So the money they pay for them to lend, they paid them to borrow money, is what it comes down to. They paid them to borrow money. 1% of 25 billion divided by 365, so it's 1% a year divided by, so it's not a lot of money, right? It wasn't a ton of money, and you can't really say that they're subsidizing, but there was liquidity troubles. So it was $25 billion lent overnight, given back the next day. There was interest that has to be paid on that, divided by 365, because it's the overnight interest rate. So it's not a lot of money, right? But what we said was this was structurally impossible to stop. So I went on the news and that whole time, and I said, to the people, you explain it to me, because they would always say, oh, it's technical, you stupid people at CoinDesk don't understand, you stupid, Bitcoin people, you don't get how banks work. And I would just say, well, explain it to me. Like, I see, why are they doing it? Why do they have to do it? Oh, they don't know, Joe Weisenthal and all these guys. I brought Joe Weisenthal to talk about it at an event, and he did his best to defend it. But what I said was, well, here's my prediction, right? Okay, if it's nothing, then it's going to go away. Right? If it's nothing, it just goes away and we forget about it, right? Okay, they figured it out. They limited the problem. I said, if it's something, they can't stop it, right? That's how we'll know if it's nothing or if it's something. If it's nothing, it goes away. If it's something, they can't control it and it perpetuates. Well, of course, it hasn't stopped. So my argument already in 2019 September was the following. Either they go into massive money printing or this stops. There's no two ways about it, right? This is a fork in the road. Oh, you Bitcoin people are so dumb. You don't get it, right? We were on this story. We were the only financial publication on earth paying attention to it. Now, we paid attention to it because we wanted it to be true. It's not like we're so insightful, right? Bitcoiners are waiting for QE. So it fit our narrative bias. We wanted to push it. We didn't really have 100% conviction we knew what we were talking about, because it is complicated. But our feeling was, and my thought was, it's one of two. As much as I looked at it, studied it, thought about it, spent time with it, I said it goes this way or that way. Well, who was right? I didn't know there was going to be a pandemic. I didn't know there was going to be an excuse to print all the money, but they printed it, right? Now, the overnight repo, right? The money the central banks give to the commercial banks in America every day, it never stops. It's over $2 trillion now. They give it back, they pay, but now that interest, right? It's higher interest rates. It's higher. It's not 1% like it was in 2019 or whatever it was, right? The real prime rate, the overnight rate. It's now whatever the hell, 3% divided by 365. So $2 trillion. I don't know the math off the top of my head, but it's a lot of money. It's not a little, it's a lot now, right? So $2 trillion a day. So who was right? I mean, obviously we were right, and not being spoken about. So that to answer your question, Muslim Bitcoiner, what we created was an account that treated individuals like the commercial banks, and in this case Kraken like the central bank, if you will, although it's not a lender of last resort, none of those things. But the relationship didn't create debt or credit between the lender, between the client and the bank. That's what we did, right? So it didn't matter what's there. There's just no liability. There's no debt or credit created from a deposit. In the system that we have for commercial banking, all deposits are liabilities and credit, right? So what we did there anticipated this falling apart, more or less. That's what we believed would happen, and we chose to create a structure that looks just like the reserve. So in the fiat system, the reserve bank and the commercial bank, we just changed that relationship to client and person. What had already been there for years before fractional reserve banking was created. Again, why I argued at the time that the data signal of proof of reserves was going to be the most important data signal in the industry. And I think I'm continue to be right about that. I think that's the way it's going to go. I think that your so forget about proof of reserves for a second as a safety feature for yourself. Think of them as a data point that the industry is going to churn stories and information off of. And there's a reason why they'll do that, because any bank that has that much assets that are in their reserves in the old system of banking before there was fiat fractional reserve lending. How much a bank had was exactly how powerful it was as an economic partner for you to realize your dreams or whatever, right? So that's what we had in mind, right? Justin says the solution for banks is collaborative custody multi-sig. Yeah, but they don't realize it yet. Yeah, it's exactly it. Adam Back is building the tool. Blockstream looks pretty ahead on it. We were never even at that level at Kraken to start thinking of multi-sig and this and that. It was really like, we have bailment as a legal structure. We can offer proof of reserve so that people know it's there. We haven't even arrived at the point where it's self-verified proof of reserves. You're still going off of attestations and all that. Like, it's still, pretty basic stuff. So, but the will to do it is there, and the intention is there, and all those things. So you're going to see it soon, and exactly as Justin said, that is the future, the multi-sig collaborative system where they can't steal from you. But the legal structure we chose at the one that Caitlin Long chose and the one that Kraken chose is the future of banking. I'm trying to get that in Canada. I'm trying to get that done in Canada too. Much easier in Canada because the bankruptcy stuff is all federal. Banking and bankruptcy is all federal. So I think we're going to be successful. We'll see. They hate our guts right now, though, so we're not getting anywhere. So let's go back to the letter that CoinDesk published. So this Liz Hoffman from Semafor, totally lost in the details, a financial illiterate. So I'll read that again. She says, setting aside whether there was fraud or not, a question for the Department of Justice, this appears to be just a run on the bank. Crypto tokens are objectively riskier, stupider collateral than mortgage bonds, but neither are cash. Same basic gravitational forces at work here. Is that true, Liz? I'm not so sure. Sure, yes, you can further inflate your assets by doing some pump and dumps, or drain them by stealing customers' money, but neither is a prerequisite for what seems to have happened here. So Star is continuing to rise. Punished Nick Carter says, there is 0% chance those numbers are even remotely correct, and it's utterly disturbing you're so credulous about a post-mortem written by a known fraudster. Pretty good, huh? You got to hand it to Nick Carter. He's a good writer, really is. And Ben Hunt took a take on this as well. So he's writing about MacGuffins, right? The story arc of SBF and FTX. You guys know what a MacGuffin is? A MacGuffin is the thing that orients the characters in a narrative that might be real or not real. It comes from what's his name? Alfred Hitchcock, right? As sort of a thing you don't have to speak about the entire time in a movie or a show in order to make the motivations of every character clear. So in Star Wars, it's like the Force, right? You don't have to mention it every 2 minutes, but you understand the motivations of characters throughout the story because you have this MacGuffin, right? So you use a MacGuffin to orient people's decisions. James says, I watch you guys on Rumble too. They said that BTC is the release valve for fiat debt credit crisis. I think the BTC bond multiplies that feature. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. Just as I said, I'm not clear enough on the bond stuff. I'm going to be learning more about it. It's sort of on my list, but that sounds like it fits with my worldview, James. So, the MacGuffin is the thing that orients characters, the things that makes their decisions make sense to us as an audience. A movie with a bad MacGuffin, you lose your attention for immediately because you actually don't understand what they're after. You lose the point of the movie and all those things. So MacGuffins are they're not necessarily important for the plot. They're important to understand the motivations for the people in the story. And Steven Spielberg was big on MacGuffins, and lots of writers are. So what Ben Hunt Epsilon theory is arguing here, and he uses 3 different articles he's written about some financial trouble over the past few years that shows it follows the same pattern. So here it is. Sam Bankman-Fried used the tools of Wall Street and narrative to perpetuate a massive fraud in the lightly regulated world of crypto. So did the promoters of crypto yield programs, all complicit feeder funds to the FTX/Alameda Ponzi. So then he puts another article, right? Senior exec, and this one is about the stock buybacks, right? So he's talking about stock buybacks as trouble. So this was crypto crash, stock buybacks, right? So two separate problems. Senior execs of S&P 500 corporations used the tools of Wall Street and narrative to monetize more than $1 trillion in stock-backed compensation, all with shareholder money, all under the knowing lie of returning capital to shareholders. So he goes through it again. It's narrative again. It's MacGuffins. It's the tools of Wall Street, and does it again. This is one that I've read on this show before. Consultants and portfolio managers use the tools of Wall Street and narrative to transform pension funds into shadow hedge funds full of swaps and leverage that transform long-term stewards into short-term traders and us into bag holders. So I mentioned this when they had the gilt trouble down in England, right? This was the article that Ben Hunt wrote about the gilt and pension troubles and how they had been oriented on short-term gains and how much trouble that had caused over the years. So that's just another thing. So what he's saying here is those tools of narrative and the manipulation that goes into them. And you see it again, right? The mainstream media can't help but string it into whatever narrative SBF continues to put at them. Whether they're being bought, paid, corrupted, we don't really know. Semafor looks more clean cut, but the other folks, right, there's all these allusions to government influence and blah, blah, blah. We're going to see, I think we're going to see, but the ability of the media to just fall for these narratives is not in doubt. So then David Sachs obviously takes issue with all this and starts attacking the Liz Hoffman article. Right away, he says the media have received their talking points, right? As if this article is designed to instruct everyone else how to frame the story, and it looks like it worked, right? Then he goes on to say that, and he proves it, that FTX's own terms of service prohibited loaning of customer deposits, therefore the fraud should be prima facie, right? He says describing what happened as a run on the bank is deceptive since FTX was not a bank. Banks have the right to lend customer deposits. FTX did not, just as I mentioned, right? Banks can do fractional reserve lending in the way that I just mentioned, not if they exist in the bank charter we got in Wyoming, and not if they are prohibited from going into fractional reserve lending. They can't do that, right? So, so here he's correct, right? And they're not allowed to do it. Customers kept those deposits for one purpose only, to trade. Appropriating those funds crossed the line, the brightest of all red lines. And here's the other thing that he comes up with. I think it's a good frame, right? Now, you know, we understand the scamminess of crypto, right? We understand the scamminess of crypto. It's there, 99.9% total outright scams, right? But the design space of experimentation, because you can't experiment on Bitcoin, right? The point of cryptography is that it is not break things, fail fast. It's the opposite. It's not consumer technology, right? It's slow and steady. How long Bitcoin has existed in its form helps create the value for it, because it is not a place. It's not experimental technology at all. It's valuable because it's proven to work, and any change to that actually increases the surface area of attack and is really dangerous for Bitcoin. Bitcoin has to be developed with adversarial thinking in mind all the time. You know, the thing I learned when I first got into Bitcoin, the blind spot I recognized, the talent I was missing. So I came at it from law, politics, economics. I understood all those things. A little bit of computer science, but it was useless because it was just like programming, right? That's not really the story of Bitcoin. The story of Bitcoin was cryptography, and that was something I knew nothing about at the time. So when I first got into Bitcoin, my original rabbit hole was everything about cryptography. I read everything. I read the original textbooks. I read the history of it. I became a real fan of cryptography, the field of cryptography. I'm a, you know, I could probably understand most things that go on in any university class around cryptography, just having read enough of the books and the history and the pieces and the functions and all that stuff. Absolutely not an expert, right? I just could follow along is what I'm saying. I don't know if I would be able to like pass a final exam or anything without studying, like just today. Of course, with studying, it would be no problem. But you know, so I built up my talent in cryptography and made sure I understand. If you want to do the same, I'll tell you what to read. Bruce Schneier's Applied Cryptography. It's got all the, what a hash is, what all those things you need to know. You want to hear the best analogy for a hash? It's the workhorse of cryptography, but how to understand hashing, it's awesome. I got it from the book. Break a plate, right? How to understand a hash, very easy to do. Break a plate, right? Who can't break a plate? But understanding the power of easy one way, hard the other of hash functions, right away you understand. Break a plate, okay, now put the plate back together so that it's the same plate, not a similar plate, the same plate, and it can't ever have any sign of having been broken or put back together, right? That's not easy. Breaking a plate couldn't be easier, right? You just drop it, count on gravity. Putting that individual plate back together, years, it's years, right? Now multiply that by 1,000 and you'll understand how hard Bitcoin hashing is to crack, right? It's that crazy. Muslim Bitcoiner says, the 70s was the explosion of thinkers who began to question the future of information safety, which evolved into a value safety. Yeah, so I actually interviewed the guy, Whitfield Diffie, who invented this stuff. He was one of these guys in the 70s and is one of the original cryptographers that from the public sector, not the military sector. He was hired by the military years later. I had lunch with him, and you want to know one of the things he was most impressed about in Bitcoin, because he got into the adversarial thinking, and that's why I'm even talking about that. You have to have adversarial thinking, and that's why Bitcoin can't absorb experimentation as easy, and that's why there is a Litecoin and all these other networks that you can mess around and break, where you can screw up, and the problems aren't catastrophic. But I got into the adversarial thinking and understanding, and here's what he came up with. The thing that really shocked him, this was when the Venezuela crap was just starting, as far as Bitcoin. Venezuela had that shit going on for long before that. But when I told him the bad news, which was the Venezuelans, this is 2017, that the Venezuelan military was looking at the power grid and getting the Bitcoin miners that way, and locating anyone in the country who was mining Bitcoin, taking their machines, taking their rigs, expropriating everything. I was troubled by it, but that's the kind of thing that said, whoa, yeah, that's a very interesting attack vector, right? And you right away, you start to see how their mind works, right? When they see an attack they hadn't thought of, they get really excited. They have to. There's no other way to do their job unless they do, right? Here I was like, oh, this is scary, and he was like, wow, we got to figure out how to solve that, right? But that's a very impressive way to attack Bitcoin. He's right. So here's what David Sachs is saying, right? When he says, the FTX fraud is trying to hide under this idea that crypto is sketchy bucket, right? But that's one of these diversion tactics. Now, again, like I just said, we all know it's true that crypto is sketchy, but there is a sliver in there that needs to happen for experimentation. It is not all sketchy. I'm not telling you to buy a bag. I'm not telling you to buy a coin. I'm not telling you to sling coins, none of that shit. I'm just saying you need not mission critical devices that people use, right? Because all cryptography is provably infallible in a vacuum, right? The academics have, libraries filled with provable cryptographic systems, but it's just on paper. You don't know if cryptography works until it's broken. You only know it works if it hasn't broken, and you only know it's worked so far. You don't have a guarantee it keeps working in the future because of this adversarial aspect. So you have to have these things in the wild. People have to use them. They have to break. People have to experiment. All that has to happen, right? So as Bitcoiners, we should resist the full-fledged indictment of crypto as a persuasive force to hide SBF's crimes. And David Sachs underlines that here. He says, the issue is just misappropriation of customer deposits. It has nothing to do with crypto is sketchy. You can throw out the crypto is sketchy thing there, and because enough people believe it, because it's true, it's going to become the reason and excuse for SBF's failures and corruption and fraud. But it's not the reason. The reason is he's a fraudster. It has nothing to do with crypto, right? Now, again, we're not here to tell you to buy coins. That's not the argument I'm making, right? I'm telling you that we need experimental crypto, and you need not mission critical crypto. You need ETH at $1. You need ETH at $1, and then you have the way to experiment in front of you. And it already clearly doesn't work. So you already have to fix things from that, right? everyone laughing. Of course, Ethereum completely censorable now. They don't know how to solve it. Blah blah blah. So that's enough of the SBF stuff. One more story today. Well, first a joke. This is offensive. I'm going to remind you all. If you're offended by violence, stuff like that, close your ears. I'm saying because it's funny, right? I think it's funny, and I've had trouble not stopping laughing. So you got all these stories about illegal immigrants in America, and now with the Balenciaga, the amount of sex offenders and pedophiles in America is becoming a much bigger story, right? Where people are starting to talk about it a lot more. So someone, as a joke, it's just a joke, but it's funny. It's just a joke, but it's funny. Put this on the internet. Let's have all the illegal immigrants hunt down the pedophiles for a chance at citizenship. We'll call it aliens versus predators. Come on. Funny. So, we've got all this talk now, and here's one story I'll even add to that. So, we've got Kanye West now running for president, a bunch of people talking about his early campaign team. McTimmy finds it funny. Thank you, McTimmy. It's offensive, but it's funny. Aliens versus predators. Come on. It's funny. It's funny. It's funny. So Kanye running in 2024. He's got Nick Fuentes now on his team. He's got Milo Yiannopoulos on his team. I'm excited. I think it's good, right? But I will flag the following. And no, not funny, Muslim Bitcoiners. It's funny. So we got the Balenciaga thing, and so Balenciaga, of course, was associated with Kanye West for a long time. So here's the newest Styx Hexenhammer 666 insight. Now, I don't necessarily agree with Styx Hexenhammer here, but I want to mention it because I hadn't thought of it first. Now, I don't really believe it, but we got to talk about it. So there are some people, Styx Hexenhammer, one of them, as well as others, who are saying that the Kanye West, Nick Fuentes, Milo Yiannopoulos thing is actually controlled opposition, right? That they've taken all of the most controversial people and are using it as an attack vector on the Trump campaign. Because, of course, Trump, I think, knows he's got to pipe the energy down if he wants to get elected this time, right? And he can't be as crazy as he was in 2016 and all those things. Now, I don't know if that's true, but I don't want to mind read Donald Trump or any of those things. And I'm certainly not trying to mind read Kanye West. But I do want to mention to this audience, because we've always been a Kanye 2024, news show. But I will say what Styx Hexenhammer said could be true. So I'm going to keep an eye on it. I continue to think Kanye is a real candidate looking for change, but I don't want it to be just controlled opposition on the Trump thing. And how do we know that's happening? Well, how about this? So Trump, because he's keeping low profile and because the media is trying to starve him of energy and attention. They don't write about him at any instance. But of course, they're writing everything about this Kanye visit because it makes him look bad, right? He's meeting the anti-Semite Kanye West and the racist Kanye West and all these things, right? Nick Fuentes, the white nationalist, and none of these things are true, obviously. And Milo Yiannopoulos, the who knows what criticism they have of him. So there's an argument out there that it's controlled opposition and the whole thing smells fishy. I don't know. I'm going to look. My gut says I don't see it, but I can imagine it. So we're going to pay attention. We still think that Ye, as part of the 2024 campaign, is going to join us in Jekyll Island for a Bitcoin presidential election show. We're going to erase the bad vibes of the US dollar at that show, and we're going to supplant the spiritual core in America with Bitcoin. So that's what we're going to do at the show. Just a little bit of this. Speaking of spiritual cores, this is the last part of the show today, and I want to mention it because all of this kind of reminds me, you talk about the sex stuff and what's going on in Balenciaga, and even just the feeling that I personally have had now that Twitter has opened up, right? Here's something that I heard on Joe Rogan yesterday. Joe Rogan had a guy named Stephen Pressfield, and he was talking about the media and CNN, like we do a lot on this show, and he said, they're the voice of fear. And they're relying on this idea that you're alone and I'm alone, and we're it's dangerous. We're so alone, and we gotta stick together against the danger, right? But I'm alone and you're alone. And this loneliness piece is, it hit me on the holidays. Now, again, I'm really lucky, right? Really lucky. But I see the loneliness out there. It's something else, right? It's as big a problem as we have. It's as big of a problem as we have. It's up there with the fentanyl, and it's like civilizationally bad how lonely people have become, particularly in North America, right? And that's how the media has become so much more successful and insidious, because people do have the loneliness. The whole magic trick works better when you're lonely. But look at the brewing trouble we have. So this is from NYU professor Scott Galloway, big anti-Trumper, big anti-whatever, but I still follow him because he does come up with some good stuff, and I am a fan, despite his liberal politics. So he did a whole show on it yesterday and said that the rise of lonely single men is interesting because the loneliness isn't something that women really deal with the same way, right? They can sort of go and lean into community, other women, but men are totally lacking in support for these issues. And lots of people sharing articles and thoughts in the comment section here from the interview he did yesterday. Tony Tone says, "This reminds me of Greg Matos' Psychology Today article, What's Behind the Rise of Lonely Single Men, published back in August." And he references dating apps, but also states there's skill deficiencies, that men lack sort of certain communication skills, and that things aren't too easy for them. And so the dating apps is one, right? So Scott Galloway sort of describes that, like I guess something like a huge portion of men under 30 aren't even having sex anymore, like way more than ever before. And what he described on the apps is that the top, 10% of males are way having way more sex than they ever had. The top half is fine, right? The top half is fine. But that the whole game that's played on these apps is really just propagating wealth. You show your Rolex, and that's what basically anyone who makes money in that top 50 to 10% that's on the apps are able to attract all the females, all of them, because it is sort of a money thing, right? Money, showing you're rich, where you're staying. I'm in New York, I got some money, I got a nice watch. They get all of the girls, right? They get all of them. And then there's this whole group that get zero, right? You get one guy who gets 5, 10 girls, and one guy gets zero, right? Didn't used to be like that. You could go meet people in a little thing. And if you didn't know this about America, like, people can't really go out the same way they used to. I've noticed it. I don't go out anymore, but already you can't, because the amount of fentanyl in all the drugs is out of control. You get when I was young and went out to bars and clubs and everybody went out, I knew people who died of heroin, but I could have told you they were going to die of heroin. Like, I could have told you, right? It was pretty obvious. The chances were high. The people dying now of fentanyl are not those people. They're just normal people looking for basic medicine, sometimes pills to study or whatever. Not stuff I take, but things that people think are helpful, and they're dying, right? Because I'm told that every pill now in America for drugs that people take recreationally or for work, Adderall and stuff like that. They're all laced now with fentanyl. So I have noticed a new distinction about who's going out and partying and drinking and who's not, right? And it changed. And it's even harder to meet people that way now, like basically impossible. People aren't meeting in bars and things like that the way they once did. But here's the answer that I see, right? So I don't think this is one of those like men and women are going to figure it out and we're just going to have strong families again and go forward, right? Things are changing on a much more fundamental level, I think. So I don't think it's necessarily just a get back to marriage and get back to partners. I think that is going to increase. I think we're going to have more healthy marriages, more people getting married. I think we will have sort of a mini baby boom at the end of this world war, right? You've already seen the baby booms in the Bitcoin world. They've happened. I've seen them. But here's the thing, and here's what I think is the way forward. And that is, it's from a, kind of one of those Jordan Peterson rules for life thing, right? So Jordan Peterson, one of his 12 rules for life are make friends with people who want the best for you. And that, I think, is one of the big, eye-opening things Bitcoiners have had, right? That separates us from the loneliness of a lot of other communities. A lot of other communities they don't really have this kind of organizing principle. They don't really have this kind of thing that brings them all together. And Bitcoin does. And luckily, a lot of the people attracted to Bitcoin are not interested in taking from you. They're not jealous of your stuff. They want you to have stuff and them to have stuff. And I'd say proportionately, Bitcoiners are the types of people who are interested in your happiness. And, it has to do in the end, I think, with changing the nature of money, right? The same way that these guys are lonely on the shows because they're trying to have all these flaunted wealth things, right? They're trying to show they have the Rolex or the whatever, right? Because everything's so primed to really like the mating part of wealth creation or whatever you want to say that you can provide and all those things, right? Whereas the Bitcoin world, the friendship isn't necessarily about the wealth. It has a lot to do with, again, the time preference, the mental health, the physical health, the alchemist stuff, right? The whole follow your energy, gather it, make it better, make it pure, make it more effective, make it more efficient on Earth, make heaven on Earth, share with your friends. And again, the organizing principle around Bitcoin, and that it seems obvious to us, it's the reason why Jordan Peterson has so much sway within the Bitcoin community, because the rules of relating, the rules of life make sense to Bitcoiners more than other people. I will go out and say that, as crazy as it sounds, I think it's true that the rules of life that someone like Jordan Peterson shares with Bitcoiners, because they're starting to get the fog out of their eyes and starting to reprioritize things correctly, can actually see the value in all of this advice. And indeed, the answer to loneliness, the crippling loneliness that's out there, are things like Bitcoin citadels, Bitcoin communities, because it isn't about flaunting your wealth. Weirdly, it's all built around money, but the last thing that you want to do in that community is flaunt your wealth. Right? It doesn't work. The things Bitcoiners do to signal being a Bitcoiner are things like keeping your room clean, you know what I mean? And things like being on time and having the discipline's the wrong word, but the inner desire to follow a certain path, right? And that it's motivated from within. A big difference, right? And that in itself, that sense of community, I think has made it so COVID, whatever, I even though I stay home a lot, even though I don't have as many friends, let's say physical friends, as I once did, I don't feel lonely. Now I have a family, again, I'm lucky, right? But even on this show, like I think even on this show, we're starting to create something new. Like this show is not about like, I tell you a bunch of stuff, and then it's not that. Like, I want the live interaction and the back and forth, and I get a lot of fulfillment out of the show being this way, reading comments and reacting to them. And to me, it feels like we're having coffee together, right? That's what I'm going for here. We're having coffee together, and we're solving some news stories in real time. I don't have the answers, right? I can do my best to set the stage and give us a frame to talk about things, but that's kind of what I bring here. So all that said, I hope this show is, if you do feel any loneliness, I hope you feel on this show that I'm trying my best to communicate individually with each and every one of the people who watch and the people who join us for coffee. Because, like I said, I think the loneliness problem is as bad as the fentanyl problem, and that says a lot. And as bad as the money problem, it's all, of course, caused from the sick money that we have. But we're here to change that, and it starts with not being lonely, right? So I'll be here again tomorrow, team. I'll be here tomorrow. When you understand the true single point of supreme entity, where all realities and logic or go rates, loneliness is out of the window. Bitcoin supplements this idea: self, sovereign, yourself, and God. That is a good point, Muslim Bitcoiner. Good point. James Gant, good vibes. Calcasa, coffee and sunrise. That's what it's all about. Coffee and sunrise here, guys. All right, team. Peace.